Welcome to the Boxing Gossip channel. David Price, heavyweight sensation, looks set to continue his heavyweight boxing career despite a knockout loss last month to Alexander Povetkin. Price has said that the fight has given him confidence that he could mix it at the top level. Price has said that the support he has received pre and post the bout has really made him believe in boxing and believe in himself again, and he wants to continue in heavyweight boxing, even referencing that he would like a European title fight. In many ways, it's not a surprise that he wants to continue. Despite defeat to Alexander Povetkin, it was an improved showing from Price. I do believe he boxed far better in the fight than we've seen of him, when he fought the likes of Christian Hammer or even Kamil Sokolowski. And to be fair to him, he did rock and drop Alexander Povetkin. I appreciate Povetkin wasn't taken off his feet, but it was a knockdown by the rules of the game. And he did show that he is still a dangerous, threatening heavyweight who retains that power, and when he lands, can really do some damage. So it doesn't surprise me. Now, David Price, he was a highly touted heavyweight on the way up. When he was coming up through the ranks, I can compare him to like a Daniel Dubois. And when he lost to Tony Thompson, the public very much took against him. They kind of viewed him as a hype job who they'd been missold to, if you like, by the boxing promoters, by Frank Maloney at the time. And, I think there was a bit of almost like an anti-David Price sentiment because of how hyped up he'd been and because of how, bad he looked against Tony Thompson in both of those fights, I guess you could say. But the tide has definitely turned in recent years, and I would say David Price is now something of a fan favourite, and he's one of those few boxers who people still want to see and still want to support despite the losses and despite the continued losses. Funnily enough, I've noticed when I do a video on David Price, it gets a lot of views. People are interested in hearing about David Price. People are interested in discussing David Price. When he fought on IFL TV against Kamil Sokolowski in a small hall fight, I remember being staggered by the amount of people interested in watching that fight and interested in discussing the fight. Obviously being co-main event on an AJ undercard has done his profile no harm whatsoever. And Price is riding the quest of a popularity wave. Despite the lack of success, he's a very popular figure, and he retains the ability to earn real substantial money in the heavyweight division right now. He really does. The mix of the division, Price could yet earn hundreds of thousands of pounds before he quits the game. Now, the European title fight against Agit Kabayel as the current champion is an interesting fight. Kabayel obviously really put a bit of a schooling on Derek Chisora when they fought, and I think at the time it was perceived that Kabayel would be used again by Matchroom for the likes of Dillian White, David Allen, etc. But, maybe Kabayel was too good for his own good that night, and, the skills he showed in there, the smart boxing he showed, maybe put Matchroom and Eddie Hearn off using him again. Maybe they'd be too nervous about putting someone like Dillian White in with him for fear that he may pull off the upset again. But I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever if Matchroom throw David Price to him. David Price is, after all, not a long-time Matchroom fighter. And David Price is someone they've had no problem throwing to the wolves against Alexander Povetkin. So Agit Kabayel is, far less of a risk in comparison. As always, Price would have advantages in the fight. Just like the fight against Povetkin, he'd have substantial size advantages. You'd also say he was a substantially bigger puncher against Agit Kabayel. But Kabayel, for me, far more advanced boxing pedigree than David Price. Far smoother, far slicker, far more elusive, far more evasive, a far better mover, more accomplished defensively. Kabayel would have a real technical advantage in the fight. But from what I've seen of Kabayel, he doesn't look like a devastating knockout puncher. He doesn't look like he's going to carry the power that Povetkin has. And I'd make Kabayel a favourite in that fight. But you wouldn't rule out David Price. Especially if he's able to box like he did against Povetkin, where I saw his jab being thrown with a bit more certainty, a bit more commitment behind the punches, a bit more, sort of a tight guard, ability to kind of position himself well and take punches on gloves. If you could see Price implement that kind of game plan, he is a fighter who could, get a win in the top 20. I'm not saying get a win in the top 5, but get a win in the top 20 perhaps. So all in all, not surprised to see David Price continuing. He's a popular figure. His profile has only risen from his recent defeat, and people will be very interested in seeing him fight. And as such, there's vast earning potential out there for him. And he may be a guy who's quite likely to get these kind of opportunities for titles because the champions will view him as easy meat. So it may mean that he's in a good position to actually get these fights and take the opportunities out there in the sport of boxing. The only thing I'd say is, can David Price fight on? Yes. Can David Price upset someone in the top 20? Yes. Does David Price still have something to offer? Yes. But, putting all that to one side, my concern with David Price is the nature of the knockouts he suffered. Tony Thompson 1 wasn't the most brutal knockout. Tony Thompson 2 was a beatdown, with Price up against the ropes taking punch after punch after punch. Erkan was a devastating knockout, a devastating icing knockout. Christian Hamer was similar to Tony Thompson 2. It was a beatdown, it was continued punishment. Alexander Povetkin was a devastating knockout. And the more of those beatdowns, the more of those devastating icing out knockouts you have, the worse it gets for you and the higher the likelihood of problems in later life and future health problems. And no one wants to see that happen to David Price. He's a nice guy. He's a very popular figure. It would be a sad look for boxing and very sad for him personally if he suffered ill effects to his health because of this pursuit. So, that's something to take into consideration. I think the other thing to take into consideration is we know David Price doesn't have the sturdiest chin of all time. That's established fact. What I'd be saying is it's also established fact that as bad as David Price's chin is, his stamina is potentially even worse than his chin. And in that Povetkin fight, we really saw him punch himself out, I believe. And we saw the adrenaline start coursing through his veins in round 3 when he got dropped, banging on the canvas, getting up, weathering the storm, throwing heavy leather back. We saw him really have to fight in round 3. And as far as I'm concerned, that's when he emptied his tank. Round 4, he became very, very, very low volume. Round 5, after Povetkin got recovered, he was a sitting duck and ready to take out. So we always know about David Price's chin. It's the first thing anyone mentions when we mention David Price. But I believe his stamina needs to be taken into account as an equally significant factor. For me, a guy like Agit Kabayel, a mover, an elusive guy, a guy who fought the distance against Derek Chisora, if I was in Kabayel's corner, I'd just be saying move around for 5 or 6 rounds. Let him chase you, let him try and get punches off. He's a big puncher, no need to take risks. By about round 5, round 6, this guy's going to be blowing out of his arse. He's not going to be able to move with you. And, then he's easy to take out. And you don't have to be a big puncher to take him out. Tony Thompson wasn't the biggest puncher. Christian Hamer isn't the biggest puncher. They just kept coming. And Price was a sitting duck. He wasn't iced out by Christian Hamer, but he was up against the ropes so fatigued he couldn't defend himself. And against a guy as smart as Agit Kabayel, it wouldn't surprise me whatsoever if, unfortunately, that is how the fight would end. Price does have a puncher's chance in any fight, but increasingly you have to say that puncher's chance is in the first couple of rounds of any fight because his stamina is one of the worst in the current heavyweight division. So it's a tough one. All in all, I think the return is unsurprising, but on the whole, my perception is it's a bad look because of the health damage he'll be doing himself by the nature of these devastating knockouts. Can he still compete? Yes. Could he still get a win? Yes. Does he still have attributes? Yes. Was it an improved performance? Yes. And can he make a hell of a lot of money? Most certainly. But if we look at the greater good for David Price, will it be doing him more harm than good? Very, very possibly. Let me know your thoughts. Are you like me? Do you have concerns? Are you still interested in seeing David Price fight? How do you think he'd match up with Kabayel? Let me know your take. Please leave your comments in the section below. If you've enjoyed this content, please hit the thumbs up button. If you haven't already done so, please press subscribe. As always, really do appreciate you guys taking the time to tune into the channel. Thanks for checking out what we're doing, and hope you guys appreciate the content. Anyway, that's out. Please like, subscribe, and leave your comments below. Many thanks for tuning in.